of the museum. You can come into the back, you can car share, you can park in the car park and say that you're coming in for a special viewing. If you can share a car with somebody to come in, that would help. Or you can, I mean, I'm sure you all know where the National Gallery is, all right? You live here, so you know where it is, and you can park in the street, St. John Street, or anywhere you can. They'll be there from 10 till 12, and we will have 2 lots of people coming in because the space is rather limited. So if you could tick your names, if you really want to come tomorrow, that would be fantastic. And I will leave them here, and then we'll have an idea of how many people we have. I apologize for the fact that it's this week and it clashes with the courses you've already booked on for, but it's a great opportunity. She will be away on maternity leave for about 4 months, and with the present budgetary constraints at the museum, there's nobody else who will be able to take over her position when she goes. So she is coming back. She's a lovely lady. She studied at the Courtauld. We had a lovely discussion this morning. So I hope some of you will decide to come with us tomorrow morning for this very special and one-off viewing of real Japanese prints, which are in the collection, which are lovely, but very rarely get displayed. So I'll say all that again at the end for people who come in a bit later. And if you want to come and ask me about all that, please do at the end. So have a look at these Chinese engravings, a map of Edo. So we're having lots of interesting things to look at here, which is wonderful. So I think we may as well start. We've been looking at aspects of the different strands, and these are only strands, all right, as you're beginning to understand that the sort of artistic heritage is quite a complex one between Orientalism, Chinoiserie and Japonism. So we've been looking at the various strands of these artistic movements and what they produced and the imagery that's come out of them, with a particular, of course, focus on Japan and Japonism, or Japanese art and Japonism, which I think you're beginning to understand are kind of 2 separate issues here, which we looked at yesterday. So today we are looking at Japan's influence on the modernist movement. Is this sound all right? Is the volume all right? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, good. So we will start here. Now, this is the poster of an exhibition in New York of Cubism and abstract art. It was made by Alfred Barr Jr., actually, Alfred Barr II. Lots of Americans have first, second, and third, right? So in 1936, before computers, this is a flow chart that was drawn by hand before computers were in evidence. And it is quite amazing because Alfred Barr has shown that the flow of the artistic movements, many and various, from the late 1890s up until 1935, because this exhibition was in 1936. So this is very well known. And look what's right up in the top left-hand corner, Japanese prints. So this is a justification for this course, basically, and its influence on Western art and also on modernism. So we have Van Gogh here, Synthesism, Cézanne, Neo-Impressionism. All these feed into Fauvism down here. Near Eastern art, abstract expressionism, Rodin is here. Of course, Negro sculpture, African sculptures feed into this, Cubism down here, machine aesthetic here, Futurism. But if we trace this little line here from Japanese prints through to Fauvism, down to abstract expressionism, and then down through we get to the Bauhaus and the modern movement. So this is my justification for saying that, yes, Japanese art had a big influence on modernism and the modern movement. So non-geometrical abstract art and geometrical abstract art are the 2 kind of strands that he's pulled out of this morass of movements Purism, neoplasticism, constructivism, Dadaism, of course, one of my great favorites when I was a student. All of that. So I think this is one of those seminal posters. It was actually the jacket of the catalogue, the cover. The only thing that's missing around about here is Art Nouveau, which is rather a shame because we have a course on Art Nouveau next week, which I hope to attend, and that really should have been up here somewhere with Beardsley. So he's kind of missed that one out, but we know about it, so we can fill in that gap. So I think this is quite a very good way to start to show where and how the modern movement evolved. So looking at some of the things we have already seen to refresh our memories, excuse me, the Kuniyoshi of 1852 I show because we've got a lot of the information about Japanese prints on this particular print itself. We have the informational cartouche, as they call it, up here, which gives us the title of the series, which is Scenes from the Provinces. This particular province is called Etchu Province. And in Etchu Province, at the back here, again, a picture within a picture, remember that? They have octopus here, and they do a lot of octopus fishing in Etchu province. Of course, octopus is a great delicacy in Japan, and they eat a lot of it. So, of course, that was very popular. So she's here with her cat, who's kind of scratching at her kimono, and we have informational seals. The publisher is here. That's another one for the publisher. The artist, Kuniyoshi, is here. We've got a censor seal. There are little seals here. That's number 7 in this particular series. And there are date seals and censor seals as well. They had to go through censorship to be allowed to be published in those days. So all this information is all around the actual print itself, giving the Japanese the information it needs. This is a 20th century print of a nice woman, again fixing her hair in a mirror, and there are many such scenes of this with the reflection in the mirror or not, as in this case. But remember the compositional elements. All right, she's taking up most of this frame here, and we saw Toulouse-Lautrec and Picasso using a similar format for their portraits of women, and this one with the big shape right in front here. So we've seen that yesterday, and the big shapes filling up the frame here, and the flat colour, the flat background. So it's very evocative, it's very direct. Are we getting a hit? We're getting a bit of a hymn, aren't we? I wonder if it's, wait a minute, maybe this, I might just move this and see, because we don't really want it. How's that? Is that better? Slightly better? All right, let's hope it works. So, Fauvism. Matisse. I don't know, can we get rid of this hum? Maybe it needs to be slightly lower. Slightly lower volume, just slightly lower. Slightly lower, slightly lower. Okay, yeah, good. Thank you. So we've got Matisse and Fauvism coming from that bar chart from Japanese prints because of the color, the format, again, filling the frame. Think of this. And the extraordinary color, the bright color, the wild color. Fauve means savage, wild beasts. And when Fauvism first was being painted, look at this red, the critics said, oh, it's too shocking, it's too bright, it's too wild, it's like wild animals, which is what fauve means in a sense. It's too loud, in other words. But we've got used to it, and we enjoy it for its color. There's another one by Henri Matisse, Lorette in a green robe. But look at the stunning black background, the boldness of the black, the green, and the pink, and this yellow ochre for her face. Stunning colors for the time. Look at this, 1905 for that painting. I find that's really extraordinary. 1916 for this painting. These are remarkable works for the time. Belle Angèle by Paul Gauguin. Again around the 1890s, a picture within a picture. again. She's isolated in this kind of oval, semi-oval. So this is interesting. There's a kind of sculpture on a shelf back here, and he's writing the title into the picture plane itself, like the writing on a Japanese print. We didn't used to put writing on paintings before, but this was becoming the form. Matisse paints a lady in a kimono with a large pattern in the background against the flat color, the bold outlines. This is what we're getting really from Japanese prints. And this one here, always, I only saw it in actuality the first time a couple of years ago. It's from the Hermitage collection, and they had a special exhibition in London. And this is a stunning painting, 1908. Matisse's father worked in the textile industry, textile trade, and he was always surrounded with patterns and textile patterns, which is why Matisse used so many of them as his props for his paintings, for the color and for the pattern. And he was great at kind of creating a stage set or a window dressing with all these wonderful fabrics. But he had his favorites, and this particular fabric can be seen in the background of many of his paintings, but in different colorways. The actual original was blue and white, but here he's used this fabulous maroon red for the whole of the background. I mean, this is quite extraordinary for the time. It is so bold with a huge pattern. Remember, I was talking about the pattern overtaking the subject matter yesterday and subsuming the subject matter. We have yellow here. That almost looks like Van Gogh's chair. You know, the chair he painted in his bedroom. It's a similar type, isn't it? We've got yellow all through here, and then yellow here. And look, a picture within a picture here, looking outside. And look at that pink offsetting this wonderful red. It's the most remarkable painting, really quite extraordinary. And of course this one, which we've seen again for the patterns, the purple robe with the anemones here. You can hardly see the anemones. I mean, they're in there somewhere, in amongst all the pattern of the background, the floor, the purple robe, which he painted many times. I mean, it's all on the same plane, isn't it? Like a Japanese print. It's all flattened out onto the same plane. Excuse me. So the French took up, as we saw with Toulouse-Lautrec and others, their poster art became famous and well known. I mean, this, again, with the sort of flat background, and I love this cat. I mean, you wouldn't want to get in a fight with that cat, would you? He'd see off all the adversaries. Wonderful cat, such a character. But look at this one, 1899. There's a little date down there, 99. This is a poster, and do you remember the Aristide Bruant poster with the red scarf? I mean, here we are. Look at this red scarf flowing out in the middle, this bright yellow background, and writing all over it. It's a wonderful example of this, taking it from another source, a Japanese source. But I also think electric automobiles in 1899, why didn't they pursue that? If we'd carried on with electric automobiles since then, we wouldn't have the pollution we've got now in London with diesel. I mean, you know, they really missed a trick with that one. Lovely poster, though, and very decorative. So things move on into the 1930s. So this fashion plate by Conway, again, these figures, these elegant figures, are filling the picture plane with the strong diagonals, the strong color, the strong prints of color. And at the same time, in the late 1900s, into the first part of the 20th century, we have this artist, Fujiki Ako, and many others who were producing, as we saw at the end of the last one, Western-style paintings, oil paintings in the Western style. And this is a particular one from that period of the 1930s. Moga and Mobo were two terms. Moga means modern girl, and Mobo is modern boy. So here is the modern girl in a bathing suit with nice little shoes at the end, not very Japanese looking, and her friend is in a nice yukata, which is a summer kimono with a lovely pattern. Again, confining the pattern, and with a lovely sun hat. Now, they would never wear a sun hat with a kimono. You know, in Japan, if you're dressing Japanese, you have to be Japanese, and you don't mix and match. They do now, but even then, in the 1930s, this was the beginning of the modern style, modern girls. So they were already, you know, progressing into westernized ideas. So these kind of flat color posters and paintings became very popular. Now, this verve is a collage. You know, Matisse, in his later life, had difficulty seeing. He had cataracts and all sorts of things, much like Monet did. But he made his paper collages, the paper cutouts, used a huge pair of scissors to cut all these wonderful shapes. Well, this is one of those collages, but it's big. It's about 6 foot tall. It's a big piece of work, and it is strong color, strong cutouts. And I think it's 1950. It's a bit difficult to tell, though. I've got it as 1950 here in my notes, but it might be a bit earlier than that. I think he died in 1954, didn't he? Something like that. Matisse, can't remember. Anyway, one of his later works, the cutouts, strong color, strong image, flat color, minimal design of the table, and a vase of some sort of flowers or foliage, not even a face. Not even a face, just a cipher for a face, a cipher for the breasts, and the triangle. So really minimal work, but powerful nonetheless. This is actually a contemporary poster. It's got the M5 motorway on it, so this is not old, but it's in the style of a 1930s railway poster. And this was very much the style of using these silk screen prints for the posters in these lovely flat colors like this. So this is harking back to the high point of travel posters, certainly in Britain for British Rail, and also the French also use wonderful posters for their travel to Vuillard or over the Alps or down to Marseille, down to Nice, all the wonderful travel posters that they were advertising, all these tours. And that really, again, all came from the idea of Japanese prints. So, coming back to Hokusai, who really is my favorite of the artists in Japan, we have his wonderful Mount Fuji over the Tama River, the blue impression, when they first introduced Prussian blue into their repertoire of colors in 1830, around about that, from the first series of the 36 Views of Mount Fuji, which was the seminal series of landscapes that he produced. So this idea, and I'm talking about the space, we were talking about yesterday about the space left in paintings, in the especially the middle section, which was not what had been done before. So we have this lovely painting in 1900s, Lake Kitele, and I'm sorry, I'm not pronouncing this very well, a Finnish artist, I think, Akseli Galen Kalela. But look at this wonderful space that he's left, with these lovely strokes right across the middle, rather like this here. And in Japanese iconography, as in earlier Chinese iconography, because their paintings were traditionally based on Chinese paintings, when they did a scene of something, they would intersperse the scene with clouds like this. And what the clouds were time and space intersection, so that when you had a large work, a screen or perhaps a hand scroll, and it was a narrative scroll, they would divide up the story, the narrative, with these cloud formations. And it might separate a storyline, or it might separate the seasons or the action. So you would read across this thing and go, oh yeah, that happened in that bit, and then there was another bit that was down here. So they're like separators. The clouds are separators. So they're spacers. And he's got it here. He probably didn't intend it. It's just like the effects of water or of wind on water. But it's very effective to use up and to articulate this 3/4 of space in the bottom part of the painting, because the high horizon line with the clouds right above there. So you've got all this. What are you going to do with all that? Well, he's filled it up in this rather nice and effective minimal way, hasn't he? So it's about composition, compositional space. And also with Hiroshige. Hiroshige was very adept at creating the atmospherics of weather, whether it was rain, we've seen his rain on the bridge, or snow, or in this case mist, an early start in the misty morning, the family going on their journey. And he's saying, oh, look, you can still see the moon is still up, it's so early in the morning. But look at this lovely softness of the mist. And we have this other beautiful painting, coastal scene, around about 1900 by Theo van Rijsberg. And this is also, look at the amount of space that he's left here. And it's like, how do you fill that space? What are you going to put in it? How do you describe the form? How do you describe the mist? So it's very bold to have that much space in a painting. This is a contemporary work, 1997. I don't particularly know this artist, but I read an article about him. And this is a painting that he did of the window in his studio, which is quite high up. I thought, that's interesting. This is actually the size of the painting, almost about that size as it is on the screen. And I thought, well, let's play with this, because if you turn it on its side, we have a very similar thing with the Hiroshige that we've looked at, with that open shoji screen opening a lovely round window here. And I'm thinking, actually, that works quite well, doesn't it, as a vertical painting? So we're just kind of playing around with images, but it's nice to do that. Now, I've been looking at the irises, the gold background, the fact that these irises are not embedded in anything. And of course, it was very much the point of Renaissance art, that if you were going to paint something like this glass on a table or a still life, it had to be on the table, and you had to be able to see and feel that it was on a surface. Well, the Japanese and the Chinese didn't bother with any of that, so they just left everything to float in an empty space. Of course, this is gold leaf, of course, and those are dark blue, they're not black because they're irises. So they were quite happy with that, and this is the three-dimensional design box by Ogata Korin, same chap. He did paintings and lacquer and all sorts of things. And I show this. This is a national treasure in the National Museum of Art in Tokyo. And it is wonderful for many reasons. A, because it's got the irises. It's got the theme of irises. And it comes from a poem called Yatsuhashi. Yatsuhashi means the 8-plank bridge. And it's in Musashi province, and you walk along the 8 planks, there's more than 8, but they call it 8, and you're walking across the river, and out of the river come the irises. Now, I know it's a genus of iris which grows in water, and I can't remember the original term, but those are the flowers that are, so you're walking around the box on the 8 planks, and there are 8 of them in inlaid pewter, black lacquer, gold for the stems, and then inlaid mother of pearl. But it's the fact that it's a 3-dimensional design. It's not flat, it goes right around the box, like this. It's articulated. And there is something about this articulated space and design which the Japanese were very adept at. I mean, this is 1700s. Right, so this is going back a few centuries, but already that is quite a radical design, even for then. So the focus on a particular subject matter, whether it's a mountain like Mount Fuji or Mont Saint-Victoire, or whether it's irises, and these are both depictions of irises by Monet, and you can tell his sight was not very good at that time. They're all very fuzzy, so they're a bit soft, on the soft side. And then Vincent does this lovely depiction again of irises and the iris heads, beautifully painted, actually. He was a wonderful draftsman. People tend to forget that about Vincent. He could actually draw very well, and his draftsmanship was really superb in some things. And of course, Monet's water lilies. Now, the fact of these, and of course the last two, is the fact that you don't have a horizon. It's all in one space. So you're literally floating over the water lilies yourself. There's no connection with the earth or the sky or the horizon. You're actually immersed in the water lilies or the irises, as if you're swimming above them or as if you're floating above them. And that also is a very different viewpoint from the normal landscapes that people were painting. So again, it's how you're viewing things. What perspective are you coming from? This is Maruyama Okyo. We saw another one of his wonderful paintings with the tiger in the narrow format. Remember that? He was also a master of landscape. This is when they painted folding screens. It was a format of Japanese screen painting. Now in China they would have folding screens with images, but they were generally in separate panels and quite often with a border around the edge of each panel to separate the images. But in Japan they opened it up like a panoramic view, a horizontal view. So, and when they painted screens, they were generally in the format of 6 panel screens, 2 of them, 12 panels. So you would have 12 panels of gold leaf. Those irises done by Ogata Korin, 12 panels of gold leaf, and those irises floating across 12 panels. It's quite something. So in this case, Maruyama Okyo's Pine in Snow, he actually did 4 versions of this for the 4 seasons. The pine in spring, the pine in summer, autumn, and the most popular one was snow. And the way he painted that, this is gold leaf on the background. The white of the snow is actually the base of the screen. It's the paper. So he painted the ink around the snow. That's actually difficult to do, to envision that and to paint it so that it works. And it almost looks like a 3-dimensional image, doesn't it? Very simple. There is only gold and ink on this painting. And this is the base of the actual screen itself, the paper base. Excuse me. So, but also, apart from that, we're looking at the space in between, the articulated space, and the fact that it's truncated. The Chinese were doing this as well, to take a section of a pine tree or a plant and truncate it, not the whole thing. Excuse me a moment. Bit of a dry throat. So we have this depiction here of the same kind of use of space in Van Gogh's Soa. It's not a good representation of that painting, I'm afraid to say. It's usually darker than that, so it's not a good color representation. But what we're looking at is the space that it creates around it, and this huge pine tree, or whatever tree it was, bisecting the whole picture. That is what we're looking at. So Hiroshige, this was the year before he died, 1857, 1858 he died, painting a series of triptychs. Triptych was a very popular format for prints, and he's painting this whirlpools at Awa. Whirlpools were very popular, a nice theme, beautifully painted coastline with rocks. This has also got an analogy to the rock gardens in Japan, so that you would have raked sand, which is raked sometimes in straight lines or sometimes in circles, and these would be the rocks. So you can also read this as perhaps the kind of image that they would make in a rock garden in Japan called sekite. So there are different levels of reading these particular images. And this one in particular I like, Edouard Vuillard, this triptych painting of a park. Now, I read you some little quotes yesterday. I'm going to read you another quote which fits with this image, and it's about Japonism and Japanese prints, and it was something that Oscar Wilde wrote. And he writes, "If you desire to see a Japanese effect, you will stay at home and steep yourself in the work of certain Japanese artists. And then, when you have absorbed the spirit of their style and caught their imaginative manner of vision, you will go some afternoon and sit in the park and stroll down Piccadilly. And if you cannot see an absolutely Japanese effect there, you will not see it anywhere." Isn't that lovely? And he got the idea, like the artists did, to absorb what was going on in these Japanese works, the space, the color, the atmosphere of them. And I think Vuillard has captured it perfectly in this public park in a triptych, because again you have this element of open space in the foreground, and the action is confined to here, to the side, there's things going on here, and right at the side there. So he's kind of opened out this breathing space in the park. And there are other artists who did similar things. Vallotton did a very nice picture, very minimal, of a little girl running one of those hoops across a park, and that's got the space involved in it. So I think this shows it very well, the absorption of the style and the feeling of Japanese vision and art, and producing it something like this. So we have other things. Paul Vallotton again making this. This is a painting, oil, on canvas. But again, this wonderful pattern making. He's used the patterns in the sky and the clouds at sunset. Actually, the moon lighting them up in this river coming here. And this is again one of two screens. There's another screen that goes there of this wonderful Mount Fuji. This is around 1600s in the Tokyo National Museum. I don't know the artist, but again, this sort of floating types of clouds. I wanted to include a little bit about Art Nouveau, because it does tie in with this, but I'm glad I didn't do too much because of the course next week that's coming. But I did want to show some of these things, like this, Isolde. And I think also Beardsley captured the minimalism, the flow, the linear flow that you see in Japanese prints. But look at this, this extended robe here, and then confining the detail to here, and this wonderful, almost blood red background, which looks a bit like a curtain, just in the top half. Again, confining the color, the flat color, to a certain section, the patches of color in this particular print, and of course the patterning, the wonderful patterning that he used in this one of Salome. And he also had a cipher for his signatures. This is Beardsley's signature here, like a sort of Japanese calligraphy in a way, like a calligraphic one. So they adopted various things to use. I wanted to show this as well. We're looking a bit at architecture and the modern movement. This is a house in up near the Montmartre region, Place de la Calvaire, the Calvaire, and it's the house of an artist and lithographer artist. So I'm kind of using it as an analogy with the Lord Leighton house that we saw in the first lecture. But this is definitely an Art Nouveau house. So he actually lived and died there from 1868 to 1930. Again, I said 1868 was a significant date because that's when the imperial court moved from Kyoto to Edo and renamed it Tokyo. Modern-day Tokyo began, in a sense, at that point. So this, that was the year that he died. There's a nice plaque here on the front of the house with a picture of him, the artist, and telling us about these details. But the door is quite amazing. It's a pity about the graffiti, of course, but the door itself is quite a work of art on its own. And it's got this little sort of spider web, and there's other sort of little things happening here, and these wonderful eyes, in a sense. So I just was walking around it, and look at the design of it. It is most unusual. There's a detail of the front door with one of two owls and this little sort of spider web peephole, in a sense. But I just thought this was a very interesting building. Unfortunately, it was not open to the public, so we couldn't go inside. I'm not even sure if it is open, but the outside itself is extraordinary. It's obviously got a roof terrace up here, but look at that. Now, don't you think that would be the studio? Do you remember Lord Leighton at the back of his house? He had this huge window for the studio to let the light in, the north light to come in. So I would say that must be the studio. But it looks almost like a René Mackintosh, doesn't it? You know the style of Mackintosh? Yeah, look at all this. I mean, it's the most fascinating building. I would love to see inside it. It must be quite extraordinary. So a little bit more Art Nouveau, this time in Brussels. 1893, remember those dates, it's not even 1900 yet. Late 19th century, the Tassel Hotel is famous as being a beautifully designed Art Nouveau building outside and in. This is the front entrance here, and this is the front foyer. And if we have a look up, we come up the stairs here to the first landing where the lounge is. And look at all this, isn't it? And that's the main staircase. Isn't it beautifully done? Next time I go to Brussels, I must stay in this hotel. One would hope it would still be open, but it's absolutely nothing is a straight line hardly, apart from the door. Everything is curved and flowing and plant-like, like Art Nouveau. All these flowing lines, quite extraordinary. Very beautiful place. So these kind of ideas, we're still looking at a bit of chinoiserie that came through into the 1900s. This is a very nice panelled screen in the Chinese style, in a sense. It says on the title, Chinese and Japanese papers. These look like Chinese papers to me, but the Japanese made very similar ones. But these designs here and at the bottom are definitely Japanese motifs, which have been carved in and gilded. And look at this, the change in the design at the bottom here. Just subtle, just enough to keep your interest. A very nice acquisition to have in your salon when you're entertaining as a talking piece. Very nice indeed. And various English designers like Edwin Godwin, 1900s, began making Japanese and Chinese inspired furniture for the turn of the century. He made this very nice cabinet here and a slightly larger version. We can see he's put Japanese lacquer panels in here with birds and flowers. So this is very beautiful, but also as a cabinet, but also to display. Now, I didn't show you, I don't think, but in the Leighton House, in the other end from the Arab Hall, he's got a very large Moroccan-style cabinet, but also displaying beautiful pots in the bottom here. So it's all to display your wonderful collection in a very decorative way. This is an interesting shot. A modern selection of different and disparate artworks in a classical proportioned room, as we can see. Tables by Edwin Godwin here and here. Some nice vases and pots, glassware. There's some ceramics on the table here. Lots of books, of course. And interesting artworks. And a piece by Gilbert and George up there, very contemporary. And a modern kind of chandelier type, minimal chandelier type light fitting up here. So very interesting, this mix and match. Rugs on the floor, nice bright colours. You could almost see a Matisse in there, couldn't you? Put a lady at this table with those mats and these big patches of colour, and you can imagine Matisse doing a painting of it, I think. Now, Japanese houses, the construction of them is quite particular. These are contemporary, of course, but the idea is interesting because it influenced many people into the 20th century, and particularly Frank Lloyd Wright. Now, Frank Lloyd Wright always denied the fact that he had any influence from Japan, which was a complete lie. Of course he did. And it's very interesting because the Japanese house is built with the entrance on the long side. Now, in our architecture, we tend to have the entrance on the shorter side and then go in lengthways, but they turn it around so that the front face is the long side. And here there's a house being constructed, and I've seen this in Japan, where near where I was studying at Nagoya University of Arts, and they were building new houses, and I've got quite a few photographs, but I haven't included them here for the sake of time. But this is a very good example. So when they're building a new Japanese house, and this is still going on, it's contemporary, they will put up the framework first, like here. Then they put the roofs on, and the roofs are always staggered like this. There's always more than one roof, usually 3 or 4. And look what we've got here, definitely, in his. And then it's usually set up. Now, as you know, there are many earthquakes in Japan. So they used to put large stones, but now they put sort of other building material underneath the supports of the house, so that it's not actually, there's no foundations, as it were, because if they had that, the whole thing would rock and crack and break. So in a traditional house, right, traditional, not the modern concrete ones they're building, we have these supports like this, which gives it air and flow, and also makes it move when the land moves if they happen to have earth tremors. So you have the framework which is put on, and then the roof structure goes on as cantilevers here to open out the space, right? So cantilevers are used, and the beams are put in, quite often double height, as we'll see. But the interesting thing is the interior space is very flexible. So you've got this large space in the middle. There are no load-bearing walls in a traditional Japanese house. They're not like ours, which is why it gives this very flexible interior. Frank Lloyd Wright adapted this in this Warren Hickok's house. This is about 1900. So he used the style to reorientate the house on the side to go in with the roofs like that. But of course he built it out of brick, so it's load-bearing walls, so it's different. But this is Katsura Villa, and we'll have a look at that, which is a classic example of traditional Japanese building. Now, this style is not the only style in traditional Japanese buildings, but it has become the generic style for Japanese architecture because it was incredibly popular. It's actually called the Shoin style, with these white exteriors and these large roofs and built up like this, very flexible. So the style was actually for the military class. The imperial aristocrats had a Chinese style of building which looks more Chinese, with corridors, separate corridors and separate things with big heavy tiled roofs, and that's called Shinden style. Then there's the Minka style, which the ordinary people had in the farmlands, the peasants. But this was the style for the military class, which then extended. This is an imperial villa, so they adopted it, but it provides a very flexible exterior and space. And this is the best example, the best preserved example from the 17th century. 1624 to 36, this site was built. 17th century, so it's quite old. And you step up on the stepping stones here to go up inside, except they don't allow you inside anymore, unfortunately, so you have to imagine that. But look at the style, this white paper screens on the outside. In the winter, they put wooden amado screens on the outside to protect that. And in that construction of the house, which is why the walls go on last, actually, because they are slid into the framework. As I said, they're not load-bearing walls. So they have this quite extraordinary feature to be light and geometric. And this is the interior of Katsura Rikyu, Katsura Palace. So we have the tatami mat formation, which can be in different ways. The tatami mat is 6 foot by 3, or 2 meters by 1 meter. The Fuzuma screens, we've seen the paintings. These are the door pulls. You pull them together. They can be taken out. These are the tracks. So you can take out the doors and open up the space. It can be a big space, or you can close it up and divide it up. Flexible modular living in the 17th century in Japan, way before we had it. Shoji screens to diffuse the light into the building to soften the light. Upper transoms here. This looks very simple, but it's beautifully built because it's for an imperial palace. So it's the best quality wood, cedar, redwoods, all sorts of things, and beautiful silk on here as well. So the idea of the straight lines, I think Frank Lloyd Wright was really inspired by the kinds of lines and putting things into nature, which is also what the Japanese do very well. So his falling water house was a radical design for a house. It doesn't even look like a house, let's face it. It looks like a collection of slabs, one on top of the other, in a natural setting, actually over a waterfall. And in fact, the Japanese would often make a water course. As the floor was built up, you didn't sit on the ground, you sat inside, which was already above the ground, and they would often put a water course underneath the building to help cool it down in summer. gets very hot and sticky in Japan, particularly in Kyoto. So this idea of falling water coming underneath the house actually is very indicative of Japanese architecture, but also the straight lines and the blocks within nature, I think is a very interesting idea. Now in the case of Katsura, the garden, which is about 16 acres, that has 4 tea houses, and they're all hidden, like in the garden. You have to go and find them and walk around the garden. There's one there, hiding in the background of the garden. So again, being subsumed by nature. This is another interior of a Buddhist temple, showing us again the painted sliding fuzumas, this time with ink paintings like the Sung dynasty of landscapes. The bell-shaped window here with shoji paper across it, which you can pull open if you want, but again to diffuse the light, and different shelves and cupboards all here. All this is painted very delicately with very beautiful landscapes. So this is the style. Now, in Japan, they rake their gardens when it's a stone garden. This is a contemporary setting. This is a contemporary house in Osaka. I'm sorry about this. This was a bit of digital interference, which I couldn't get rid of. It's a fault. I've been trying to get rid of this, so that shouldn't be there. I don't know what that is, so we'll have to ignore that bit. But anyway, they rake the gravel every day, every morning in the temples. There's a rake here. Now, this is a very interesting contemporary house by Yasujiro Aoki. It was commissioned for a house in Osaka by a private client. And this is the Tsubo Niwa, which is the courtyard garden. And this is the winter and summer theme for the courtyard. The summer is with the water to cool you down. The winter is the dry. Now, they've flooded that to give a water garden, and the same garden can be used as a dry garden. And you can change this arrangement any way you like. It's very flexible, but it's very effective. It's a very simple way of changing the atmosphere and changing the whole feeling of this quite small space. It's like a corridor, but opened out to create the sense of space, look at all that space there, and calm, and to give a different aspect for the different seasons. Quite clever, isn't it? It's a simple idea, but well executed. So looking at various forms of Japanese construction, there's Katsura again, with these strong straight lines, rectilinear. And this is Yoshimura House in Osaka. This is 19th century, typical merchant's house, and they have thatched roof up here, tiles here, and then this lovely kind of design of wooden structures here with a doorway there. Very nice. I always thought Mondrian must have gone to Japan and must have really enjoyed. I don't think he did, but he must have seen some pictures of it, because it really echoes Mondrian, doesn't it? With these lovely patches of color here and all these lovely straight lines and the white. Also, this poster for an exhibition in Basel, triennial, I think it's 29 or 30s, early 30s, Bauhaus. And of course, they had this particular style of strong, linear style, minimal, strong diagonals, as we've seen in Japanese prints and paintings. So it's a flattened out perspective. It's a flattened view of something. And if we look at these, this is a Hiroshige. It's a lovely room in a tea house. So when you want to open out in the summer, you take out the outer amado screens, and you can actually get a view like that in a Japanese traditional house with the building. So they're actually looking at the moon. This is moon up here. So you can actually open all this out, and then you put the screens back in for the night or for the winter. The shoji screen is here, and look, there's a shadow of a geisha, an entertainer here, and they've just had a meal and some tea here. But this is a real thing. You can do that in Japan because of the flexibility. And in other traditional rooms and houses and temples, you have the fuzuma screens, and you can have this effect by painting a beautiful pine tree articulated going around the corner. Doesn't have to be a flat thing. You articulate an image across a six-fold screen. You can articulate it around the corner here. You can open the Fusuma and change that pattern all the time. It's very flexible. Nothing stays the same. So this is a traditional style. This is the generic traditional style of Japanese house building in a contemporary setting. And this is now the generic idea of Japanese architecture. So we have the tatami mats on the floor, which are rice straw mats. There's a little hearth here in the middle, which you can just about see. And the tokonoma is the display alcove here, in which they hang a painting, put some flower arranging or a nice piece of sculpture or whatever it is. Shoji screens in different styles, in different shapes. Transoms up here with beautiful wood and carving to let the soft light in. Right, there's a little screen up here, a little window up here. So it's all about softness and neutral color to calm things down. And when you look at those spaces and you look at early 20th century architectural design, you can feel that space where they got the ideas from. So Eileen Gray, wonderful designer. This is her place in New York, her living room, with a large round rug here and large painting there. But look at the space in the middle. Look at all this, the straight lines. So I'm thinking, yes, this is a Japanese idea. This is a flexible living space by an artist in his villa. It's I got the spelling wrong, I'm sorry, it's Fergini, Luigi Fergini, sorry, I got that wrong, late 1920s. This is actually an outside courtyard here. So he's got a big window screen here looking out into a courtyard to give the light. There's a curtain coming across here, which you can divide up the space or not. Chair and desk. Very minimal, very clean, very open. If we go again and look at the inside of a traditional house, this is in Takayama, 19th century, they often had the open structure showing like that, like open beams right up above. That's the central hearth here. This is hanging from this beam across here. And this is where they would cook and have a meal and sit round. These are tatami mats around here. So this is like a farmhouse, which you can still find in the rural sector of Japan. Shoji screens down here in different sizes. These are cupboards up here. And a display of items up there. It's 19th century, so they have a clock. Of course, 19th century import of modern Western things. There's a clock there. But this open structure is quite fabulous. So when you see this villa, La Roche by Le Corbusier, 1923 to 1925, look at all the straight lines, look at all the black and white, the open space, the high ceilings, the articulated space, which is all open plan. I think this is really quite amazing. And he was very influenced by Japanese art and took this sense of scale and design to create a modernist effect. This is interior for living, again with a huge space. I mean, you could see this today and live in this. This looks normal to us. It's modern, it's clean, it's open, it's bright. 1929, amazing, really quite an extraordinary concept. And look at all this open space. I wish my place looked as clean and empty as that. This is the only problem. Where do you put everything that you have? I just think it's interesting to contrast that with about the same time, 1926, in Miami, building a new garden city. And this is in the Moorish style. This is kind of going back to the first session we had with the Oriental style, the Moorish style, the Arabic style, in a sense creating an exotic kind of place to be, whereas the modernist was all about minimalism and getting away from that complexity. So again, looking at this kind of idea in another house by Green and Green architects, 1908, stairway going up with open sort of beams here, and another type of traditional Japanese house building there. And this I found interesting, a Burberry shop, Burberry checks, patterns, opened in 2006 in London, and I just saw this as complete Japan. I thought, oh, look at this. Look at the windows, the screens, the black lines, the rectilinear staging, the open platforms up here. It's really taking that kind of vision and creating a modern style, really coming from this. So this to me is really sort of Japanist in style. Americans built a lot of things in the sort of area, especially in California, sort of in the landscape. But one of the most intriguing and interesting American architects, American Chinese architect, is I.M. Pei. And I.M. Pei in 1996 created this very extraordinary museum. The Miho Museum is outside of Kyoto. It takes about 2 hours to get there. It's in the middle of the mountains. You have to go through a mountain actually to get there. This is the sort of landing stage, and the building is here. They had to dig out and excavate part of this landscape. They bought the land. The richest woman in Japan has commissioned this for her collection of artworks. So they dug out all of this, created the building, and then put it all back in again to embed it into the landscape. I mean, a huge undertaking. It cost millions of yen, a lot of money, and took about 6 years to build. But it is very interesting. So there are two wings in the middle of this, and I'll just run through quickly. I know we're getting a bit over time here, but this is the plan. So the north wing is here, which is where the Japanese art collection is housed, and the south wing is here, where the Western art collection is housed. And the Western art collection includes things like Assyrian art, Egyptian art, Italian art, all that kind of stuff. And the Japanese wing here is to do with paintings and prints and other things. So this is the entranceway. You come across this bridge, and there is a little golf cart that will take you if you don't want to walk the 1.5 miles from the bus stop down there. And this is the main entrance with a kind of moon gate. You know, in Chinese gardens you have a moon gate here. But this roof is pure Japanese traditional building style. The thatched roofs that they had in the rural sectors are exactly this kind of hipped and gabled shape. So this is taking its cue from traditional Japanese building, but in modern materials. Tensile steel to let the light in. But so you come in through and this is up a long flight of steps down here. So you come up here, and you come into the reception area, and look how the roof is articulated right through the wall space, in fact, bisecting it and coming right down into it. It's the most extraordinary structure. And this is a new type of steel, which is slatted, as you can see, to let the light in, but to reflect the heat out, to keep it cool. So, and it's in the middle of this forest area. It's a national park area. So there is all of this. This is part of the entranceway where you go from one wing to the other through these marble. This is Carrara marble. You know how expensive that is? The whole place is full of Carrara marble. I mean, it's very, very beautiful, very high quality. So you're walking around this. It's very quiet. Not many people go there because it takes so long to get there, but it's a beautiful place. And the main entrance and reception area, you see this. Now, this is iconic, and it was specifically created. So it might remind you of something. Does it remind you of this? And does it remind you of that? So if we think about it and we put them together, and you imagine this in winter with the snow, it's a living screen, a living pine screen. And you imagine that with snow, it is the perfect work of art, of natural art, like these. I mean, really quite extraordinary how they've created that out of the landscape. Obviously, it was planted, it was trimmed, it's been cut to produce that particular effect, which is a classic Japanese view of pine tree and snow. Quite remarkable. And in the center part of the north wing, we have a very classical style of Japanese rock garden with the moss. All right, it's not particularly special, but it's there, and it's there symbolically to represent Japan as the typical symbolic rock garden in their favor. So they don't build just that, they build lots of other things, and also Japanese architects, like all sorts of people, are very famous and well known throughout the world. This is KAP, means Kumamoto Art Project. It's in the western part of Japan in Kyushu. And during the 1990s, when Japan had a lot of money washing around, they opened up a whole nationwide project to upgrade buildings in all parts of Japan. So this is a Mizumi Harbor Ferry in Mizumi, looking a bit like a kind of corkscrew. I mean, quite extraordinary buildings. Kisho Kurokawa is one of the foremost Japanese architects who are very well known in the international circuit. And this is his General Science Museum in Ehime Prefecture. And he does a lot with strange shaped buildings of all shapes and sizes. There's almost like a gherkin one here, but this cone is quite amazing. It's all part of the science complex